this turned into a very interesting podcast quite quickly.
It's just how I do them.
Is this the way we do?
Ignition sequence start. 3, 2, 1.
Boom, we're here with Liam at Time Doctor. How's it going, Liam? You like that? We get right into it.
Yeah, that was a little bit aggressive, but I'm
I know, you're about to tell me a story. I was like, no, wait.
Super personal story.
We need to record this.
But we can record it.
Tell me, what was it?
So I met Marielle, who's my partner now.
Yeah, we had dinner the other night. That was awesome.
Years.
Yeah, she teaches people how to be mermaids.
She does, yeah.
Is she the
mermaid.com.
world? Okay, she's at the top in the world.
Yeah, there's no bigger influencer than her
in mermaids.
mermaiding, which is like
mermaiding.
So if you look at that niche, what do you think of the niche of mermaiding is?
Well,
Mermaid
I would take
tails.
it's a subset of people that like those My Little Ponies.
Yeah, okay.
Just kidding.
Interesting.
People that like to go swimming. I don't know, maybe total addressable market of 5,000
People?
Yeah.
Significantly more than that. What do you think of just the mermaid tail sales per year are?
Oh, well, see, this is interesting because my friend has 3 little girls and they all have mermaid tails.
Mm-hmm.
Huh. Okay, I'm going to try a good guess here. I'm going to do some math in my head and we're going to go 50 million.
500 million.
Wow, 10x bigger. That's bananas.
It is one of those little niches that you don't know is that deep until you actually get into it. And it's been really fun for me to do the reverse.
Because you've been helping her with marketing and stuff.
Co-founder of a software company. Mm-hmm. And then what's the polar opposite of that? It's a mermaid company. And seeing whether those same fundamentals exist. Apply.
I had that same experience with my brother with the home building. I'm brick and mortar versus ones and zeros.
It's so interesting. And it's like a dessert business. It's kind of like okay, let's see if I can do this. Let's kind of stretch myself a little bit in this direction.
What do you mean by dessert business?
So running remote.
Thanks for the coffee, man. This is awesome.
No worries. Running remote is what I consider my dessert business.
It's not the core.
It's the Friday business where I can say, I'm going to work on this on Fridays, and I'm going to commit the rest of my energy, which was a lesson from you, by the way. Don't get distracted. Don't do 10 other things.
Yes.
Put in, can I afford to give 8 hours a week to this? If I can, and I can actually delegate it to the point in which it's doing something, then great. Any more time, if I see it starting to work into the main part of the business, then I really need to do an assessment and figure out, okay, is this something that I really want to do in a bigger way? Are there income opportunities there that could be bigger than what our software companies are currently doing?
Yeah.
Yes or no? And to be honest with you, going into a conference, it's not a very profitable business model fundamentally, right? Like, if you're doing a good job, you're doing it 20% net.
Yeah, that's like in the top 10% of conferences.
So if you're breaking even, you're pretty happy with that.
Yeah.
If you're making 5%, 10%, you're pretty good.
Yeah.
So that's something that I need to be mindful of because I like doing it.
Okay, it's dessert. You know it's not always the best thing for you, but it tastes some good.
Yeah, exactly.
And Marielle sees that as... Did you see that as helping her as a dessert business for you or for her?
So...
And how did you meet her? Because that's what you were going to finish.
So men and women or partners in business together, I don't know whether or not that mixes very well.
I can't pull it off.
So I've been, I would say the majority of our fights have been, and we don't fight, are around business issues.
Okay.
So I've kind of decided I'm going to put this in a little box. You do what you want to do. So as an example, a couple of days ago, she had an IP issue with one of her competitors, right? And I told her not to do this thing. And she said in her French-Canadian accent, I'm going to do whatever I want.
That's not probably how she said it, did she? No explicits? Yeah. Okay.
So I said, cool, go ahead. And, within 6 hours, she had to very publicly take it down and apologize and all these types of things because she's just a ready, fire, aim type of person, which is very good.
I love that.
As an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
But sometimes you step on a couple people's toes.
You will have to apologize.
Yeah. So I'm legal in the back saying, hey, I think you should really not do this. I think this is going to actually bite you in the ass.
Yeah.
And I would say it bites her in the ass more often than she succeeds. But that's just the way that those relationships work.
This, Liam. You're okay with?
Yeah, that's totally fine. Because we've already discussed this. I'm totally open.
Okay.
Yeah. 100%. I mean, like, so my mindset is we might as well put it all out there.
Okay. But you were going to tell a story of how you met her, maybe, or something.
So I met her at Mastermind Talks.
Oh wow, MMT.
First one in Toronto.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was where
you were too.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember going in there, and this is something that some people know, but not enough people know. I'm putting it out here too. She was maybe like, I don't know, 22, 23 or something like that. She really wanted to go to Mastermind Talks.
Okay.
Yeah. And it's expensive, right? It's a very significant investment.
Premium invest.
Yeah. So she shows up at the front desk and she says, hey, I've been sent to film. I'm here to help the film crew. So the people
Not
at the
true,
front
though.
desk, not true.
Okay,
So
this is interesting because I know Jason very well. I'm curious, and I think Mosey will forget Chandler Bolt. I don't know if you know Chandler, but he was a volunteer there year one. Amir Rosick. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so actually
lots of great people,
Yeah.
you know, and
so
it's
what
just
did
sort of
they,
like
what happened?
So they told her,
But you didn't
oh, well,
meet
why don't
there,
you go?
did you?
I met at that conference.
Because she tried to get in.
So she then went over to the videographer, Gebbs.
Yeah, Michael Gebbins.
Who's super happy guy. One of the happiest
I've never
people
not
on planet Earth.
in the planet Earth. Yes,
And
accurate.
Then she said, well, I was sent by the front desk to help you film. And Gebbs was like, oh, great. Help me out. So she was there for the 2 days.
This worked.
This worked. She got in. And then she approached me at lunch.
Why?
And just started chatting with me.
Okay,
so she thought that I was a really nasty guy the first time that she met me.
Okay.
She said that I was very kind of transactional in the way that I interacted with people, which may have been correct. I remember going into that event just being like, wow, there are some fantastic people.
Okay.
That was when we just started
Okay.
Time Doctor and Staff.com as our other product. And I was very transactional, but then I said, oh man, this girl's really cute. So I said, I got her phone number. And then maybe about 3 or 4 days later, we ended up connecting over drinks. And it's like 7 years later. I don't know,
did
6 years later.
Jason Gaynard ever find out that she...
I think I actually did tell Jason a couple of years ago.
That would be amazing.
Yeah.
I'd clip this out and send it to him.
It's crazy that it's just sort of like...
I just find this so fascinating because clearly I was there. That was the event where I shared my story for the first time ever.
Yeah.
And that
was intense, by the way.
Well, I didn't know how to tell it without, it's one of those things where you want to be raw, but it can be intense. But the fun fact for those that don't know this is not only was it the first time I told it because of the reason was the charity component. So whoever won the best talk would win. I came in second behind Joey Coleman, who is a world-class speaker. So he totally deserved it. But before I go on, Renee goes to me, my wife, fiance at the time, she's pregnant. She goes, my parents are on their way. They wanted to surprise you. They want to see your talk. And I was like, don't let them leave until I talk to them. And her mom broke down in tears when I came off stage after and talked to her because she said, I had no clue, but now it makes sense. Because she couldn't understand me. And anyways, it's neat to know that not only was it a pivotal event for me, but for other people, obviously yourself and many others.
And I think about you a lot in that context of where you came from and where you are now. And not to necessarily be disingenuous, but like life's been pretty easy for me overall. I'm very successful. I'm very happy of where I am right now. Life is great. But I wasn't dealt the cards that you were dealt at the beginning of that process. And if I were dealt those cards, I don't know where I'd be right now. And I think, and you do a lot of work about this as well, I don't know where the majority of those people are. Was it luck? Was it mindset? Was it skill? That's something that I think about a lot because I try to figure out what are those people in society that have been dealt that bad hand and where can they go? And you're an example of success.
Yeah.
But there are plenty of people that haven't, they've been dealt the same cards and they didn't get to the place where you are right now.
So there's Jason, actually, Gaynard, same guy, MMT, invited a bunch of friends to do the Hustle 2.0 event, which is in prison in the U.S.
Yeah.
What prison was north of L.A., and so we go into this prison. We spend a day with, they don't like to call them inmates. They call them incarcerated individuals or, offenders. They just don't like the word inmate. And we do this program, and one of the exercises that we do is called Step to the Line. So Step to the Line is you have all the volunteers. All the volunteers are entrepreneurs, okay? So a lot of the people you would have met at MMT are on this side, and then on the other side, it's all the incarcerated individuals, which are, between 22 and some of them are 56 years old. And Kat, who runs the program, there's a line in the front of us, all of us, and she starts asking questions. Things like step to the line if you've ever drank, you know what I mean? And then everybody steps back, and then it's step to the line, and it just progressively gets more intimate, Step to the line if you were raised by a single parent. Step to the line if you've ever committed a crime and not been caught for it. Which, I mean, if you've ever, most of us have.
Yeah.
Right? So all of a sudden now you're starting to see this where both parties step to the line, right? Including the ones that are incarcerated. And everybody that's on the line that is not in there, we start realizing that we're not dissimilar. And then it just gets continuously worse. Step to the line if you've ever had a sibling die, if you've ever had your parent abuse you, if you ever lost a child. I mean, it was such a powerful exercise to just demonstrate, I think what you're saying is, a lot of it is circumstance and environment, and for whatever reason, some of us discovered entrepreneurship, and some of us had people show up in their lives like I had. I had an incredible person named Brian that took me aside and shared some words with me that transformed my life, and some of them didn't. So it's interesting that you say that, and I appreciate it because I think about it all the time. Because my work with kids, it's like, what was it? Because if I knew, I would obviously love to share it.
Yeah, my mother's a school teacher, or she was a school teacher. She's retired now. And the amount of kids that she saw going through that she just knew without someone coming in to make that course correction, they're moving in this direction in their lives. And the vast majority of the time, she's right.
Did she feel like that's what she saw as it was somebody came into that child's life?
Well, so she was always telling me the horror stories, right? Like the kid whose father murdered the wife, the mother, and was disposing of the body over a couple weeks while the kid is in the house. And the psychological damage that type of child experiences in the 5th grade. And my mother has no psychologist, no sociologist, no social worker. It's just her as the primary, caregiver to be able to make sure that this kid is okay because they're being managed by their grandparents, that kind of thing. Like that kind of stuff is just
intense.
How do you overcome that? How do you, and there's plenty of people that are damaged to some degree, but then how do you overcome that? And I could say, well, there's definitely things that have happened in my life that have produced damage, but not in the same degree to like the vast majority of people. And
trauma.
My success stems from having a proper upbringing, having an environment that's really great for me to be able to succeed. I was able to pursue a sports career. I was able to pursue graduate school. All of the pieces came into place. But there was no point in which I was just in a high-speed chase with a Kia Coke in the back and a gun.
Yeah.
That wasn't in my deck,
reality,
right? Yeah, I didn't pick up that joker. And so that happens to a lot of people, and happens even to people that work for me. And I try to think to myself, well, how can I actually we had someone just recently who about a year and a half ago that they were addicted to some restricted substances, and we fired the person and we said, well, we'll pay for rehab, and they didn't take that option.
Yeah.
And they couldn't work in the company anymore.
Yeah.
So how do you get that person to make that course correction?
Oh, that's hard, man. I still haven't figured that out. I do a lot better, obviously, with the ones that are ready for that change. I get the call from the parent.
Yeah, I mean, those are the ones that
It's tough.
I feel for this person that's worked with us for years, and I was just like, where did that go wrong? Could I have come in 3 months earlier and possibly dropped the hammer down, and maybe things would have been different? You think about that, and you think, because we have about 100 people right now in 32 different countries all over the world. It's very difficult to be able to manage their day in, day out of their lives.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of other variables that we measure from an HR perspective to make sure that they're okay. And even I have friends of mine that have gone that direction as well. But like figuring out where you can I detect that earlier? Could I have made that change 2 weeks earlier, 3 weeks earlier? I think I remember I was telling you about. I put it on your group. A friend of mine, Ryan, who had, I call him, he died of mental illness. I think that's at least the way that I want to interpret it. And I've just spoken to my therapist about this. And good friend of mine, entrepreneur, killed himself.
How long ago?
About 2 years ago. Yeah. And good friend of mine. And where he went wrong, I remember talking to him 2 weeks before he did it. And I remember there were definite signs that something was going wrong. And I was in Hong Kong because I have this fantastic lifestyle. I'm so happy, I'm just incredibly happy as a person. And I remember him saying, oh yeah, everything's great. I said, well, why don't you, he ran an entrepreneur group. I said, you could use our office space if you wanted to I was trying to get him remotivated. And he said, no, everything's fine. And, nothing was fine. So where do you go with that? Was that too late? Should I have spoken to him 6 months ago, a year ago? Was there something else that I could have done? And when I talked to my therapist, the answer is no. The answer is there are people who kill themselves, and there are people who talk about killing themselves. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, those are two very separate groups.
Separate people, yeah.
So the people that are going to kill themselves do it.
Yep.
And they usually don't give you very good signs beforehand that they're going to have it happen. And suicide is a massive epidemic in our society. And it's also massively overrepresented in entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
And you coach entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
Right? So mindset is one of those things that is probably a pretty important component of your job. And you're dealing with these high-level performers that are doing absolutely amazing
type
things.
A, incredible people.
But then when you have that type A person, maybe they're not interested in getting help. Maybe they put that down in their box deep down, and eventually it comes back. Because one thing can go wrong, you're okay. 2 things can go wrong, maybe you're in a bad mood. If 7 things go wrong all at the same time, can happen to anybody.
Especially if you have your identity tied up in the business. And that's a lot of the work I do. I just had a client just reach out to me a couple weeks ago, and usually I can tell when the email is like, serious. We need to talk.
Yeah.
And we get on the call, and he shared with me, I've been drinking way too much, I'm eating way too much, and I'm like spiraling, and I don't know how to stop it. And you mentioned, quickly that you talked to your therapist. I think it's one of those things where I'm a business coach, but I can also, I think I have a responsibility to set the example, and I think that there's some leading habits that are positive, like working out and feeding your mind and surrounding yourself with the right people. And those are kind of outside of the tactical things that I teach on how to grow businesses. I put in there because the talking about getting a therapist is probably a little too much. Like some people don't want to be told that, but in that case,
I talk about my therapist a lot so that we're trying to break those barriers.
Totally. Down. And that's like what I said, because I was like, dude, like there's things that I'm not qualified to support you on. Mm-hmm. And these are some of those. Like when we started digging into why he unfortunately had a family member take his life as well a couple years prior, was just, wasn't sure if he was still dealing with that. If he was, one of the big things that we discovered was that he didn't feel deserving of his success. He had grown the business 4X in, a year and started sabotaging himself, his relationship in his business. He had like half his staff quit on him because he became an absent owner.
That's a
real
problem that a lot of people have. I've had that problem.
Yep.
Self-sabotage, where it's just sort of like, why are you not doing that? And actually, I've figured out a good technique, at least for myself, to be able to get past that, which is if it's the thing that you don't want to do, usually the moment you do it, you immediately feel better.
Like going to the gym.
Yeah. Or like ripping off a Band-Aid, right?
Yep.
It's just sort of like...
it's the right thing. It's hard, but once you do it, letting somebody go.
I make videos of myself when I haven't been to the gym in a while, and the gym that I have is open till midnight. So a couple years ago, I made a commitment to go into the gym every single day. So just walk in. I can walk right back out.
Yep, but just get in the door.
Yeah, so that's been actually a challenge recently that has been a big issue for me. And
is going to the gym?
Is going to the gym, yeah. I lost my workout partner. So that's just
Change
a major
routine,
part of just that reliability, that routine to be able to get back into it. And I've been doing a lot of traveling.
Yeah.
That's always super difficult. I was able to work out in Cairo a week ago with an Olympic cyclist, which was amazing. These are the type of amazing opportunities that, I'm able to experience, which are just mind-blowing in what entrepreneurship can open up for you. But I still have these challenges. So what I do is I make a video of myself after I get out of the gym talking about how great I feel after I got out of the gym.
To yourself, or do you put it on social?
Yeah, to myself. No, I'm just like, Liam, you feel fantastic right now. Like you got endorphins running through your system.
Do this again.
You feel good. Your back feels better.
Gosh darn it.
Do this again.
You look good.
I don't go that far.
You don't go that far? Yeah. Okay, cool.
Maybe you do. So
it's that whole Saturday Night Live skit where the guy's in the mirror and he's talking to himself.
I don't know that one.
No?
No. You send it to me.
Yeah.
So I make these videos and like I'm trying to figure out all these triggers to be able to keep myself performing at a high level. And that's actually, to go from the people that are dealt that bad hand and maybe they falter versus keeping yourself at like that high performance level.
Yeah, man.
Those are two separate issues.
Yeah.
But I think they're actually
they're
connected.
Similar. Yeah. No, my whole thing is even that mindset, you said it real quick, like I remind myself every day, and one of my things is sweat every day is because I get to. Right. And I remind myself I get to run today. I get to work out today. I get to work with my team or, clients. And because I never want to take it for granted because there's so many people that can't. And I know them because I visit them, in prison or in rehab or that, are physically impaired and they would love the opportunity to go run 5K. They just physically can't. And I just think that it's a really important mindset to kind of,
my uncle, who's a quadriplegic, I remember when we were going up some stairs, and I was walking up the stairs, and I always used to run upstairs, and I walked upstairs at one point. And he's like, "Why are you walking up the stairs?" And I said, "I don't know." He said, "Never walk upstairs. Always run up them." I can't run upstairs. You should always run up the stairs. So every flight of stairs, I run up the stairs.
Sprint.
And the moment I can't do that, man, something's wrong.
Something's broken.
Yeah. This turned into a very interesting podcast quite quickly.
It's just how I do them.
Is this the way we do?
It's how I do them.
We don't talk about business. We don't talk about anything like that.
It's the conversation that we would have over dinner.
Right.
That people get to listen in on. Right. So I've always been curious, how did you and Rob become business partners? Because Rob lives in Australia. You live in Ottawa.
We're also very different people.
Uh-huh.
Yep.
I coach both of you guys.
Yep.
I feel like a marriage counselor sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah, no. So me and Rob met at South by Southwest. I have a lot to thank for that conference.
That's where we met.
Yeah, the first South by, I was running a consultancy that was helping YouTube channels basically monetize.
Okay.
And I was doing one of the first instances where you could basically have a URL inside of your advertisement. So I was able to secure the Netflix CPA deal for a particular YouTube channel, and I took a percentage of that.
Wow. Because they were giving like $20 signups or something back then, right?
I think I'm still under NDA, but it was
more
very, very good.
Okay.
Like millions and millions of dollars
Nice
a month,
work. Yeah.
as an example. So that, I remember going to South by, spoke on this panel, met Rob, met you, and closed a deal that was going to set me up for the next couple years, like easily. And from that, so at that point, YouTube was relatively new. You know, it evolved, but it was at a certain point in which it really wasn't the big thing that it is today.
Had you been going to events prior? Was that like the first event that you got out to?
I had been to a couple of other events. Actually, a friend of mine, Esprit, had put me on a panel for remote work. So
Okay.
she knew that I was an expert on remote work, even because I've been doing it for 15 years.
Okay.
Yeah, so I've always worked remotely. It's always been my preferred way to work.
Yeah. And you guys run the conference now?
We're running remote, yeah. And so for us, or for me, that was one of the first conferences that I ever went to that was like big. And I walked away with a multi-million-dollar deal in my pocket and a business partner. And I came to the conclusion, do I want to continue on with this YouTube thing, or do I want to learn software? Because Rob basically had an alpha of Time Doctor, and Rob is a medical doctor, so that's where the term Time Doctor comes from. And he said, basically this tool was
So he's a doctor.
He's a medical doctor.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah,
now that you say that, I can understand
he's an
why.
ER doctor.
Yes.
Yeah.
He looks like a doctor.
Right.
It makes sense.
Yeah. No, I think we should get more into sort of me and Rob's dynamic, because it's a really interesting. So Rob is one of my best friends. We are business partners.
I love in the first few conversations we had together, he was like in his garage. I think it was like
it's his kids. Yeah.
Yeah. He's on his iPhone like late at night because he's Australia.
One of the
just
best
face lit up.
work ethics I've ever met.
Yeah.
His work ethic is insane, but he is the polar opposite personality type from me.
Okay.
So it's a yin and yang type of situation. I like to get my information from people. He likes to get his information from books, as an example. Like I would go out and say, okay, well, how do you run Facebook ads? Well, let's talk to 5 experts
that do Facebook ads.
Yeah. But Rob goes deep, and he's like, okay, I'm going to go into this hole for the next 25 hours, read all this information, come out the other end and say, this is how you run Facebook ads. And that approach actually is quite good. If you can keep that relationship stable, I actually think it's a really good founding team, because what he's good at, I'm not good at, and the reverse. But it's interesting because it can provide unique challenges in the way that we work. And Rob is the CEO of the company. And I think another important aspect to the way that we've succeeded is Rob is the CEO of the company. If Rob decides to do something, if he's made the decision, that's the decision. Even if I think it's a horrible decision.
Disagree and commit.
I disagree with your decision. Yeah. I think it's the wrong decision. I'm going to try to make this decision as successful as humanly possible.
Don't most people report to you?
No, so it depends. Like I do most of the marketing.
Okay.
So marketing and sales, customer success, they report to me.
And he manages engineering?
Engineering, support to a degree, and then also runs the executive team.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm one of those executives that sit on that team. But fundamentally, at the end of the day, Rob's the CEO of the company. I've had a lot of private conversations with Rob, which are just like, we had an issue about 9 months ago, and if you're a customer of Time Doctor, you probably know, we went down for 2.5 days. Lost $1 million ARR. Wow. In 2 days. It was a disaster. right? Like a disaster. And about a month later, Rob comes to me and says, well, I think you're right. We should have really re-engineered our tech stack way earlier. We should have been paying down this technological debt. And this was me 2 years ago saying, we need to do this. We need to pause for 6 months, and we need, and I was getting it from other people saying, you haven't refactored your tech in 6 years? It's a ticking time bomb. You're playing Russian roulette. And because we're both not technical founders, and Rob is the person that's leading the tech team, I basically just said, okay, well, all these other people are telling me that this is a really bad idea, but it's your decision, and we're going to go the way you want to go. And he told me that privately. Now I'm telling everybody on YouTube, but we do have that good relationship where he can come back and say, you know what, you were right, I was wrong. Let's try to fix this problem and move forward. But at the end of the day, if you're constantly fighting about those issues, I see a lot of young founding teams, and they tear themselves apart because there's just lines that they don't that they say, like, this line and no further. We are not doing this. Well, then someone's got to go, right? Like, it's not a holocracy. It is a military service. You are in, like, there is a general of the company, and you can disagree, but once that decision is made, you got to move forward. Sometimes making the wrong decision is better than making no decision at all. Yeah.
What have you learned about, like, building remote teams? Like, from I know that you talked about some situations that some bad situations where you wish you could have been more in the know. But how do you build teams even if they're distributed?
Well, and so we have I have a friend of mine, Andreas Klinger, who just started a fund.
I thought you just went and said we, and then okay, I'm going to make it about somebody else.
Yeah, no.
So I have this friend.
So I have this friend. The reason is last year at Running Remote, my friend Andreas, who is the CTO, who was the CTO at Product Hunt, and now is the guy in charge of remote development at AngelList. He spoke at last year's Running Remote. Fantastic presentation. He just blew everyone away. And he said, I'd love to I've always wanted a fund just to be able to fund remote companies. Because one of the biggest variables that we've had, and you're asking this question, how do you build remote teams? It's so new, right? I've been doing it for 15 years. Time Doctor's been up and running for 8 years. But remote work is relatively new, right? Like the last 5 years, it's really started to pop up.
I think WeWork enabled a lot of distributed teams.
And then it crashed and burned, and now we're going to be in trouble for the next couple of years. But so now you have, and even tools like Slack, these
Zoom. Transformed
these infrastructure tools to be able to really work remotely.
Even like Office Vibes or like a Fellow.app or to get you some sentiment of what's going on amongst your team.
So we've got all of these. Now that we've just got the infrastructure in place, now we need to get the money. So it was mind blowing because Andreas raised couple $100,000 in 20 minutes, just saying, well, I've always wanted to build this fund connected to remote work.
And that's the thesis?
The thesis of the fund is because venture does not understand how remote work adds into their formula, because all venture capitalists have this formula, right? It's like, come to the Valley, get really smart people, pay them $250,000 a year, and then you're going to produce this output. Remote is a very different model. So they don't know where to put that inside of their formula. So our thesis is there are really great companies that are being built.
What are some ones that you could I know of Automatic, GitHub, but what are other ones?
GitLab, Envision. So Envision's a really interesting one.
Envision's interesting, New York based.
4-year company, $1 billion valuation.
Wow.
Entirely remote.
I didn't know that.
Employees.
I thought they were
entirely remote.
1,200 employees.
Entirely remote.
Envisionapp.com.
Yes.
Wow.
And I think they're top 3 fastest growing companies in the last year in terms of the tech space.
Yeah, I know SlideShare had a big remote team. But mostly because
I was just on a podcast with HubSpot.
Yeah,
just recently.
I was in Boston, and he talked about how
1/5 of their team is remote.
Well, the thesis was interesting because Dharmesh, he's such a thinker, and he just said, "Look, I was against it. I wanted an office and all these things, but if our philosophy is we got to hire the best people, then the probability of the best people being within a 50-kilometer or 50-mile radius of our head office in whatever city we're in, I mean, statistically, and so you got really math equation about it. He's like, it's just not probable. So
Envision has exactly the same thesis. And
it's funny
actually,
37 Signals has been talking about this for.
Yeah, but so 37 Signals, incredibly successful business.
Yes.
But then you think to yourself, oh, that's a cute little business.
Yeah,
well, it is a cute, awesome business.
Yeah.
Like, it's a great business to be able to run.
Yeah.
They could have grown it bigger.
Yeah.
They chose not to, which
Small
I
giants.
really respect.
Yep,
right?
totally.
But yeah, so right now,
who are the biggest companies at scale?
I'd say Envision, Automatic, Zapier. Wade's coming to running remote.
Oh, cool.
Which is going to be really awesome.
Did they announce 50 million AR or something like that? What are their
I think they're above that now.
Above that.
I think, and they also have like 40 people. So like they've got one of the best revenue
MRR per employee,
exactly. So that's nuts. These companies are starting to come up, but the data is still small. So the fund's thesis is, well, because venture doesn't know what to do with these companies, let's invest in these companies, and there won't be as much competition. Right? Another one
because it's the thesis of the fund.
Another one is Hotjar.
Okay.
Bootstrapped.
Yep.
30 million ARR company.
Yeah.
They've said they're at 20 million, but I knew they were growing way past that.
Yeah.
Ken Weary was at Running Remote last year, and bootstrap company. They tried to get venture capital. Everyone laughed at them. They're like, "You're remote." Like,
it's funny.
Well, everyone needs to come to Boston.
Yeah.
Palo Alto, Toronto.
That playbook
it
has never, for majority of VCs, they've just never invested in a company where they've seen that. So they just say pattern recognition, not
unknown.
Comply,
Correct.
pass.
Right.
What are you seeing companies do right that are succeeding?
This is a funny one. So I've had the opportunity to do Running Remote for a couple of years now, and interact with some of the best remote first founders on planet Earth. And so I asked them questions like, well, what does everyone think about doing video calls on Zoom? And I get different answers. And I actually am getting different answers on everything. So I can talk to Envision, and they can do things one way, and then I can talk to Automatic, and they do things very, very differently. Or HubSpot does things very, very differently. Marcy Murray, who is the director of support for Shopify, she went from 0 to 2,000 remote support reps within 3 years, right? So Shopify is actually majority remote.
Yeah, because they said I thought Toby said 1,000 employees.
In their Ottawa office.
Oh.
In their Ottawa office.
Okay.
So their support, and it's like, yes, it's a support department, but you've got to run it like a business, especially at that scale, right? If you have 2,000 support reps, you've got to run that like an entire self-sustaining business. So there's these companies that are running remote, and I'm blown away that no one knows what they're doing. Like, there's no playbook. No one agrees. And so my thesis out of that, or my presumption, is because remote work is the single thing that you can do to improve the productivity of your employees inside of an organization, everyone's doing it wrong, but it doesn't matter because the productivity gains are so high. So on average, when you take someone remote, they increase their productivity by 40%.
Yeah.
And that is, if you unpack that number,
it's just because of disruptions, the travel time,
3 hours driving per day. I'm going to go into an office.
I got a second meeting.
Kids,
yeah.
Like
water cooler conversations.
I'm much happier with myself.
Yeah.
And then on the negative side, I'm alone.
Yeah.
I feel disconnected from everyone.
Yeah.
like all of these, when you add them all up, it's about a 40% productivity gain, which is insane.
Yeah.
Right. But more importantly, IBM just ran a pilot project where they took 5% of their employees remote, and they saved $30 million just in office costs for the year. So I actually think long-term, in 10 years, people will be asking to go back inside of an office, because once the next economic correction happens, which is coming, that most large corporate will see this remote thing that just recently the pipes have been laid, as you mentioned.
Yep.
Slack, Zoom, the infrastructure is deployed.
Yeah.
And they'll say to themselves, oh, well, let's try this remote thing. And then they'll say, holy shit, this is amazing. You know, like we're doing huge numbers, and our P&L just dropped by 20%. We can keep everyone hired, but we just reduced our cost by 20% across the board. Well, let's implement that everywhere. And within 10 years, I think people will say, I want to come back into the office because I want that type of personal interaction.
Right? We get used to a certain thing, then we want the opposite, and then we come back. Like,
everyone talks about the advantages to the individual employee. And when I talk to people at Running Remote, I say, well, forget about that. If you really want to change minds, talk about the nuts and bolts, the dollars and cents connected to going remote.
Yeah, and also the quality of the candidates you're able to recruit.
Yeah. So if you can find, like, Envision is a perfect example of just finding absolute amazing people so quickly. And I think this is going to last for the next 18 to 24 months, where you'll be able to find that absolute top tier talent.
And then you think there's going to be a competitive market?
HubSpot's already in.
Yes.
Right. Like, so
they're going to pay.
So you're going to go in and you're going to say, okay, well, you live in middle America.
Yeah.
And I'm going to hire you today for $60,000.
They're going to be like, well, HubSpot's going to pay me $120.
Right. I have someone that we just hired recently, fantastic hire. She worked for 7 years at Indeed, customer success, senior customer success rep.
Yeah.
Indeed would not let her work remotely. She moved to Eastern Europe to be closer to her family. And guess who picked her up? Us.
Yeah.
At a lower cost than she was in Toronto. We're paying her less because she's in Eastern Europe. And fantastic person. We're sucking up that talent.
For now. At that price point.
Yeah, until HubSpot and all those guys come in, and then it's a bidding war.
Yeah.
But there is a really interesting, I would call it maybe 18 to 36 month opportunity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Liam, when you look back at, 15 years, sounds like you've been doing entrepreneurial stuff. Even at the beginning of Time Doctor, when you first met Rob, a decade ago, to the person you are today, who have you had to become to be the person sitting in front of me today?
Boy, I think, so I talk about this a lot, the challenge of moving from an entrepreneur to an executive. And that's a major challenge for me. So the ability to be able to, entrepreneurs want to do everything themselves, and they want to just come in and they just want to do it. And I actually think that for you to be a successful business owner long-term, you need to almost do the polar opposite. You need to learn the art of delegation later on in life. So going from 0 to 1, right? Someone please buy this thing. It's a completely new piece of technology.
You can brute force it.
I mean, I remember when we were first starting up, I was just calling friends of mine. Like, hey, you know what? You said you always had this problem. You should check it out, right? Like, I can set you up for a month or two if you want, that type of thing, right? And that's the stuff that I actually really like. And then when you're 100 people and you have 15,000 leads a month coming into the business, it changes to, okay, well now there are 6 people that report to me. And then those people have people that report to them, and they probably have people that report to them too. And I'm not directly operating, which is also probably why Running Remote gives me the opportunity to kind of get a little bit of that back. Like I am an entrepreneur at my core.
Yeah, you're a creator.
Yeah, but you've got to become a delegator. You've got to become that executive level person to be able to get it to the next level. And I've learned that from a lot of mentors. Toby, as an example, is one that's just his ability to understand where his weaknesses are and delegate the right person to that weakness at the expense of his ego in some cases.
Huge.
I think is just that's such a powerful lesson and so difficult for a lot of entrepreneurs to learn.
Well, when I interviewed him, he mentioned that his job is to essentially grow and backfill as fast as possible. grow, backfill.
Right.
Anything that you wanted to chat about that we haven't?
Man, I mean, maybe we should get into the dynamic of me and Rob. I think that's something, because like I have no problem discussing that on the internet. I'd love to be able to know how founders that are very different can work better together. And this is something that like I've been, and your group is amazing. I actually think
SaaS Academy for those
SaaS
listening.
Academy.
Yeah.
So I think the value of your group is the people that are there, right? Like those are and at least for a personality type like me that really likes to learn through learning from other people.
Yeah, and that's why the program I designed, it's got different facets.
Yeah.
Like for Rob that wants to like consume the online content and go deep, you can do that.
I think I'm the 98th percentile of inquisitiveness on a personality, psychographic metrics. So like, I love just asking questions and figuring out how things work. And usually I do that through people. So that's probably the biggest thing that I would try to, I am constantly trying to think about is like, how can our dynamics work better? We just hired one of the most expensive employees we've ever hired in the company. Very solid 6-figure salary, and someone who we basically said, if they're not way smarter than us, we shouldn't be hiring them.
And what are they leading? What's the...
So this is actually one of the interesting things that came up with me and Rob is initially Rob had said, well, I want a COO. And my definition of what a COO is.
So you guys did make that hire.
We made that hire about
Congrats,
3 days ago.
Man.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy that like that person is working in the company.
Yeah,
and it's
they
just
could
like
work anywhere.
She was working somewhere else. She had 4 other offers, right? And it's just sort of like, okay, that's super cool that you're working with us. I'm really nervous.
Are you worried that you're going to mess it up?
I'm worried that I'm going to mess it up. Yeah. And I'm also worried that between the two of us, Rob is super sort of micromanager and I'm the polar opposite.
Yeah.
Whenever you talk to employees in the company that talk about the differences between us, it's like, well, you can never get a hold of Liam. Liam just says, well, here are your numbers. Hit them or don't. That's your job. And then Rob is the polar opposite. Like, okay, let's work this down. How can I meet with you every single day? Yeah. Show me what you're doing. Show me how I can make those corrections, that kind of thing. And those are 2 very different people. and I'm concerned if we've purchased basically a Lamborghini, we got to let that thing go, right?
Yeah.
Like we got to just let that woman execute and go in that direction. And this is actually one of the things that I told Rob. I said, if we're going to hire this person, you delegate a responsibility to that person.
Yeah, do you really want to see? I remember that conversation we had at the restaurant.
Yeah.
Like,
are you going
to let this person do their job?
That's it. And that's something that up until right now, I'm still not convinced that he has the capability to do.
Yeah.
To get really deep and down and dirty about it. Yeah. I mean, like,
no, but it's a real thing. And the challenge there is going to be that if there's an expectation that I want to see results quickly in the COO role, especially at your guys' scale, it's going to be tough for them to have a significant impact in the short term to start building that trust. But at the same time, if I'm that COO, my job in the first few months is not to do anything drastic. It's to understand the landscape. It's to earn the trust.
Yep. And
through earning that trust, allow the founders, Rob, to be comfortable with abdicating or
delegating responsibility and really letting that happen.
And letting it happen. So it's and I think it's important that there's at least a time commitment, 6 months, a year, just to give the person space to breathe. Yeah. Because if you hold them on a short leash and say because you're spending real money, right? I've seen too many people make the mistake of, in and out within 3 months. There was no the person wasn't even given a chance to make it work, Right. But you should know. Like, I also had a friend that hired somebody and he was having an issue with them. And I said, well, let me talk to him. I got on the phone. I said, you got to let him go. The guy's ridiculous. Like, he doesn't know what he's doing. Like, I asked him basic questions and he was the COO and he couldn't answer them. Like, he's got to go. Yep. That's different than, hey, you obviously interviewed them. They're really good. Let's make sure we give them the ability to win.
Yeah. I think that this woman has this capability for me, and this is another interesting way in the way that the differences in the way we work. Rob really studies people deeply, and I say, I don't want to talk to anybody unless they've built an 8-figure business or sat on the executive board of a few 8-figure software companies.
Yeah,
those are the only people I want to talk to.
I'm going there. I only want to talk to people who've been there.
And then, Rob's bringing up a bunch of other people that are like, well, this guy could be awesome and this guy could be awesome. And for me, it's just like, I really create these weird mental rules in my mind, which is, well, if they're not this.
Well, they're pattern recognition too. You've probably had success in the past by finding those people, getting advice from people that have been there, and it just seems to be better advice.
Smarter than me.
Yeah.
Smarter than me.
Yeah, like that. This is a thing that I'm not sure, because I don't see the day-to-day between you and Rob, and I've only met like Mick and a few other people on your team. We need to continue, and this is the thing I've seen consistently across my fastest growing companies, is they always hire people that make them worried that they're going to figure out that they're not as smart as the people they hired. Like they are way smarter.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So the first thing, with the short list that I had spoken to, I told all 3 of them, your job is to be my boss eventually. Like that's my goal for you is I want you to tell me, like, you point me in the right direction of what you need me to do, and then let's execute on that.
Yeah.
Rob's a really smart guy. Rob's smarter than me, for sure. But sometimes a really smart guy can't actually pause and say to himself, well, maybe this person is smarter than me. So that's one of the challenges that I think we have. I would love to be able to know, too, for you, like, out of looking at all of these entrepreneurs, if you had to boil it down to like top 3 things or one thing, what would you say it is in terms of founding teams and their success? Do you see any pattern recognition
100%.
there?
Yeah. I would say, 1, the diversity, right? Toby used the word neurodiversity. I thought that was pretty freaking nerdy. I was like, do say more. So everybody's got to go listen to that episode where I interviewed Toby at Shopify. But you see this amongst all, like the ones that took a while to finally get escape velocity. That's why I called this show Escape Velocity. The founding team were too similar. And so neurodiversity, I think, about different perspectives, because it allows people to solve problems.
Check the box. I got that.
A lot of it comes down to just product market fit. I mean, you can't escape the fact that, if you got lightning in the bottle, you just gotta be smart enough to put the cap on.
Yeah. That's one of those things that
I feel bad when people are like, how did, David from David Lecco from Deal Machine, 110K in MRR, 800K in 11 months. Like, everybody how did he do that? And I'm like, well, he had a great product market fit. But I will say the technical debt part is the other thing that you mentioned. I think that the companies that grew the fastest had the technical leadership to make sure that they were paying down the co-debt. That's 2. Because I've seen, you guys had an outage, but I've seen many other companies get clobbered by competition that came out that were after them, but because they were able to move faster and build features faster, they ate the market. Okay.
We've been seeing, for us, 1-week integrations now versus 3-month integrations.
Exactly. Just little things like that. And just, I think it's cool in the early days of having somebody on Upwork build your first MVP, but at a certain point you got to bring the development in-house.
Right.
So I still have clients that don't have their core development in-house, and that's one of the big things that I'm bringing down. And then I would say the third thing they figure out sooner than later is their pricing, packaging, and plans. So most founders aren't optimizing pricing and packages soon enough. Yeah. Do these resonate with you, Liam?
Well, no, we haven't touched on pricing in 8 years, which you had mentioned.
Did you say 8 years?
8 years.
Okay.
And that was actually one of the conversations that I had with Rob.
At the last event because of Patrick's talk?
But more importantly, with this new hire, I said, well, if this new hire wants to change pricing,
are you going to let them?
Are you going to let them? And he's, he has this very Australian way of kind of pulling the conversation away from that. And, and then I just like, because I know him so well, I smack him right back in the face. And I'm like, no, like if we're hiring this person, then they need to be able to move in these directions.
Yeah.
And one of those would be changing the pricing. One of the things, just funnily enough, when we did our entire refactoring, we had an old code base, we had our new code base on staff.com, which is our other URL, and our old code base on Time Doctor. So then we actually moved it over to the Time Doctor URL. But one of the things that we didn't do is on Time Doctor, the first seat is free, which we call the administration seat. So basically the business owner's seat is always free. And then the first person you manage is a paid seat. We didn't remember to add in that feature in the new build.
So it was just paid right off the bat?
The owner seat was paid, and it converted at the same rate. So
dramatically different.
We were looking at the numbers, and we're like, okay, so we're getting the same amount of conversion points, but for some reason we're generating 20% more revenue from this group than from this group. And we're just like slicing the numbers 20 different ways. It's like, what's going on? And then we figured it out, which was, oh, well, the owner seat is paid. So right out of the bat, they're paying an extra $10 per month. And and then the fight with me was, well, we should not be changing this back, right? And it's like, well, we have almost 10,000 customers on Time Doctor. They'd be super angry if we ended up making that change. I was like, no, this sounds like a great change, because it's like we're seeing that with the new cohort. Let's apply that to everyone else.
Yeah.
So those are changes that I hope we'll make, in the next couple months. But it's an interesting challenge dealing with. At the end of the day, it just boils down to like, you're right, product. Product is something I can't change at this point. Like, we're set. This is the product that we have, and this is the direction that we're going.
Problem you're solving,
the problem that we're solving. But then after that, it's just like human dynamics.
Leadership, pricing. Liam, if somebody wants to reach out, where should people find you?
TimeDoctor.com if you want to try out Time Doctor. And I don't answer the vast majority of my social media, but the only place that you will get a response from me in a couple hours is YouTube.
Okay.
So I actually think YouTube is the most honest form of social media ever.
I reply to all my own comments. Most people don't know that. They're like, I need you as a mentor. I'm like, just post a comment on my video.
Right. So youtube.com/running remote. And if you can't afford to go to Running Remote, all the talks are up there for free.
Check them out.
Yep.
Liam, appreciate you, man. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for watching this episode of Escape Velocity. Be sure to like and subscribe and leave a comment with your biggest insight from our conversation. Be sure to check out the next episode.